I see you there, shifting in the silence, your hands folded too tightly, your breathing shallow as if afraid that drawing too much air might disturb the fragile equilibrium you have spent your life maintaining. You have not come here for comfort, though comfort is what you have given endlessly to others. You have come because something inside you is approaching its breaking point, that terrible, inevitable moment when the soul that has absorbed too much finally says, "Enough." This is what I have termed the day the empath breaks, not the gentle bending that has characterized your entire existence, but the sudden, irreversible snap that echoes through every layer of the psyche like the crack of a bone that has borne too much weight for too long. It is not anger that drives this moment, though anger may be present. It is not hatred, though hatred may finally be acknowledged. It is the profound archetypal refusal of a soul that recognizes it has been slowly dying in service to the very people it sought to heal. For years, perhaps decades, you have stood as the emotional shock absorber for every system you have entered. The family that needed someone to metabolize their unspoken rage, the friendships that required a repository for projected shame, the workplace that demanded a human sponge for collective anxiety and unprocessed grief. You learned this role so early that it became indistinguishable from your identity. The child who felt the atmospheric pressure drop before the storm of adult emotion and learned to change the weather through their own careful choreography of responsiveness. You became exquisite at reading the unspoken, fluent in the language of sighs and sideways glances, a living seismograph for the emotional earthquakes that threatened to destroy your world. And in this learning, something essential was sacrificed, the knowledge of where you end and others begin. The persona you constructed was a masterpiece of adaptive camouflage, always the right temperature for the room, always the perfect mirror for what others needed to see. But personas, no matter how skillfully crafted, are masks worn by the ego to survive in a hostile world. And masks, when worn too long, begin to fuse with the flesh. Jung understood that every archetype carries within itself its own shadow, its own inevitable reversal. The helper who helps until they cannot help themselves, the giver who gives until there is nothing left to give, the absorber who absorbs until the container cracks and everything pours out at once. This reversal is not pathology. It is the psyche's own immune system finally asserting itself, the unconscious demanding that the balance which has been so catastrophically disturbed be restored through whatever means necessary. The shadow that has been feeding in the depths all these years, growing fat on unexpressed anger, unacknowledged resentment, unspoken needs, finally rises to reclaim what has been denied. When the empath breaks, it is not a gentle correction. It is an archetypal event, a volcanic eruption from depths that have been pressurized beyond endurance. The friend whose crisis calls you have answered at 3 a.m. for 15 years will suddenly find your phone going straight to voicemail. The family member whose emotional storms you have weathered without complaint will meet a wall where once there was infinite accommodation. The colleague who has depended on your endless patience will discover that patience, like all resources, can be exhausted. To the outside world, this transformation appears sudden, inexplicable, even cruel. Where is the person who always understood, who never judged, who absorbed every difficult emotion without ever reflecting it back? But Jung knew that nothing in the psyche is truly sudden. Every explosion has been building pressure for years. Every snap has been preceded by countless microfractures. Every breaking point has announced itself in 1,000 ignored signals. The dreams that have been growing darker, filled with imagery of drowning, suffocation, imprisonment. The physical symptoms that have been accumulating, the chronic fatigue, the mysterious illnesses, the body's rebellion against the soul's endless surrender. The moments of inexplicable rage that flare and die, quickly suppressed because good people don't feel that way. the growing sense of emptiness, of living life as a character in someone else's story. These are not random occurrences. They are the unconscious preparing for revolution, the shadow gathering its forces for the inevitable confrontation with consciousness. When the break finally comes, it manifests first as what Jung called the withdrawal of projections, the sudden, startling recognition that the pain you have been carrying is not your own. The grief that has weighed you down for years belongs to your mother, who never learned to mourn her losses. The anxiety that keeps you awake at night is your partner's fear, unconsciously transferred to you. The rage that feels so foreign and frightening is the accumulated anger of everyone who has used you as their emotional waste disposal system. This recognition is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it reveals that you are not the twisted, damaged person you believed yourself to be. Terrifying because it means the entire structure of your relationships has been built on a foundation of unconscious manipulation and projection. The empath who breaks begins to see clearly for the first time the intricate web of emotional contracts that have governed their existence. I will carry your pain so you don't have to feel it. I will absorb your anger so you can maintain your image. I will sacrifice my needs so you can remain comfortable. These contracts were never consciously negotiated, never explicitly agreed upon, but they have determined the shape and texture of every relationship, and now the empath is unilaterally canceling them all. The archetypal energy that emerges in this breaking is often the warrior, not the warrior who fights external battles, but the inner warrior who finally stands guard at the threshold of the soul. This warrior has been sleeping for so long that its awakening feels foreign, even threatening. You may not recognize yourself in the mirror. The face that looks back has a hardness you don't remember, eyes that no longer automatically soften in the presence of others' distress. This hardness is not cruelty, it is protection. It is the soul's armor, hastily constructed to guard against further violation. But alongside the warrior comes the shadow, that vast repository of everything you have denied in your endless quest to be good. The shadow carries your unlived life, the dreams you deferred to serve others' ambitions, the desires you suppressed to avoid seeming selfish, the boundaries you never set for fear of rejection. When the shadow emerges, it brings with it a tsunami of previously forbidden emotions. Rage at the years of exploitation disguised as love. Grief for the authentic self that was sacrificed on the altar of others' comfort. Resentment toward those who took without giving, who assumed your availability was infinite. This emotional explosion can feel overwhelming, as if you are being consumed by darkness that you never knew existed within you. But Jung understood that this darkness is not pathological, it is compensatory. It is the psyche's attempt to restore balance to a system that has been catastrophically one-sided. The shadow demands to be acknowledged, not as an enemy to be defeated, but as an essential part of the psyche that has been exiled for too long. In the dreams of those experiencing this breaking, certain symbols appear with startling regularity. Walls crumbling, revealing hidden rooms. Animals, wolves, bears, lions, emerging from cages. Fires burning through landscapes that seemed frozen. Swords being pulled from ancient stones. These are not nightmares, but birth dreams, images of psychological structures being dismantled so that new ones can be built on firmer ground. The crumbling walls represent the dissolution of false boundaries, the artificial divisions between acceptable and unacceptable emotions. The emerging animals symbolize instinctual energies that have been caged by social conditioning but are now breaking free. The fire represents the alchemical process by which the soul burns away what is false to reveal what is true. But perhaps the most significant symbol is that of the sword being drawn from stone, the moment when the empathy that has been a source of vulnerability becomes an instrument of discernment. This sword is not wielded against others, but against the projections, manipulations, and unconscious contracts that have bound the empath in relationships of mutual destruction. With this sword, the broken empath learns to cut the psychic cords that have drained their energy, to sever the emotional umbilical cords that have kept them trapped in patterns of caretaking and codependence. The breaking of the empath is often experienced by those around them as betrayal. Family members who have relied on the empath's emotional labor may rage at this sudden withdrawal. Friends who have used the empath as their therapist may accuse them of selfishness or cruelty. Partners who have depended on the empath's endless accommodation may threaten abandonment. This resistance is predictable and archetypal. It is the collective shadow fighting to maintain the status quo that serves its interests. But the empath who has truly broken can no longer be manipulated by these tactics. They have touched something deeper than the need to be liked, something more essential than the fear of rejection. They have contacted what Jung called the self, that eternal core of being that exists independent of others' opinions or needs. This contact with the self is what makes the breaking irreversible. Once you have tasted the freedom of authentic existence, the prison of endless accommodation becomes unbearable. But the journey from breaking to healing is neither swift nor easy. The empath must navigate what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a period of profound disorientation as every familiar structure collapses. Who are you when you are not needed? What is your value when you are not useful? How do you relate when you are not rescuing? These questions pierce to the heart of the empathic identity crisis. For so long, worth has been measured by the capacity to absorb others' pain, value determined by the willingness to sacrifice personal needs. Now, stripped of these familiar roles, the empath must discover who they are beneath the layers of adaptive conditioning. This discovery often begins in solitude, not the imposed isolation of depression, but the chosen retreat of someone who needs space to hear their own voice after years of listening only to others. In this solitude, the empath may experience what Jung called the return of the soul, the gradual reconnection with parts of themselves that have been dormant for decades. Creativity that was stifled in service to others' drama begins to stir. Dreams that were deferred start to resurface. Desires that were buried under layers of duty begin to breathe again. This return is not always comfortable. The authentic self that emerges may be very different from the accommodating persona that has been worn for so long. It may have sharp edges, firm boundaries, and little tolerance for manipulation. It may want things that seem selfish after years of selflessness. It may feel anger that seems dangerous after decades of endless patience. But Jung understood that this apparent selfishness is actually self-preservation. This seeming cruelty is actually clarity. This apparent hardness is actually the soul's protective shell while it regrows. The process of integration that follows the breaking is delicate and complex. It requires learning to hold paradox, to be both open and boundaried, both caring and self-protecting, both empathic and discriminating. This is the true maturation of the empathic gift, not its elimination, but its conscious application. The healed empath learns to feel deeply without absorbing completely, to care profoundly without caring more than the other person cares for themselves. They develop what Jung called the capacity for conscious suffering, the ability to witness pain without automatically taking it on, to offer presence without losing presence, to love without losing themselves in the loving. This transformation often manifests in changed relationship dynamics. Some relationships will not survive the empath's newfound boundaries. Those that were built entirely on the foundation of one-sided giving will crumble when reciprocity is demanded. But other relationships will deepen in ways that seemed impossible before. When the empath stops absorbing others' emotions, those others are forced to develop their own emotional intelligence and resilience. Children learn to self-soothe instead of relying on an empathic parent to regulate their emotions. Partners develop their own capacity for empathy instead of outsourcing all emotional labor to the empath. Friends learn to offer support instead of only receiving it. This redistribution of emotional responsibility creates the possibility for relationships based on mutual respect rather than unconscious exploitation. But perhaps the most profound change is in the empath's relationship with their own empathic gift, where once it felt like a curse, an unwanted sensitivity that made life overwhelming, it now becomes a conscious tool of connection and discernment. The empath learns to turn their sensitivity inward as well as outward, to feel their own emotions with the same clarity they once reserved for others' feelings. They discover that their capacity to read atmospheric shifts can serve their own well-being as much as it once served others. They can sense when a situation is energetically toxic before they become overwhelmed by it. They can feel the difference between genuine need and manipulative demand. They can recognize the subtle energy signatures of those who seek to exploit empathic gifts versus those who offer genuine reciprocity. This refined sensitivity becomes what Jung called the gift of discrimination, the ability to distinguish between what serves life and what drains it, what nourishes growth and what perpetuates dysfunction. In dreams, this integration phase is often symbolized by images of restoration and rebuilding, temples being reconstructed with stronger foundations, gardens being replanted with careful attention to which plants belong where, boundaries being drawn not as walls but as living hedges that breathe and grow. The empath begins to understand that boundaries are not barriers to love, but the very conditions that make authentic love possible. Without boundaries, there is no true meeting between souls, only fusion, absorption, and the gradual dissolution of individual identity. With conscious boundaries, the empath can love more deeply than ever before, precisely because they are loving from choice rather than compulsion, from fullness rather than emptiness. The years following the breaking often bring a quality of life that the empath never thought possible. Relationships become more honest, more reciprocal, more nourishing. Work becomes an expression of authentic gifts rather than endless accommodation to others' needs. Creativity flourishes as energy that was once drained by emotional caretaking becomes available for personal expression. Physical health often improves dramatically as the body is no longer required to process others' emotional toxicity. Sleep becomes restorative rather than an escape from overwhelming sensitivity. But perhaps most importantly, the empath discovers a quality Jung called authentic presence, the ability to be fully themselves in any situation without needing to adjust their energy to accommodate others' comfort. This presence has a quality that is both magnetic and protective. It attracts those who are ready for genuine relationship, while naturally repelling those who seek to exploit or manipulate. The empath becomes what Jung called a conscious conductor of energy, someone who can channel empathic gifts in service of healing and growth without sacrificing their own vitality and well-being. They learn to work with their sensitivity rather than being victimized by it, to use their capacity for deep feeling as a source of wisdom rather than a pathway to depletion. But Jung also warned that this transformation is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. The old patterns of absorption and accommodation can reassert themselves, especially during times of stress or vulnerability. The empath must remain vigilant, continually checking in with themselves. Whose emotions am I feeling right now? What am I taking on that isn't mine? How can I offer compassion without losing myself in the process? This ongoing self-inquiry becomes a form of spiritual practice, a way of maintaining conscious relationship with the empathic gift, while protecting the integrity of the individual soul. As the years pass, the day of the breaking begins to feel less like a catastrophe and more like a liberation, the moment when the soul finally said enough to patterns that were slowly destroying it. The empath comes to understand that the breaking was not a failure of compassion, but its ultimate expression, the compassionate act of refusing to participate in their own annihilation. They realize that by healing their relationship to their empathic gifts, they have not only saved themselves but created a template for healthier relationships that others can follow. Every empath who learns to love without self-sacrifice gives permission for others to do the same. Every person who develops conscious boundaries creates space for more authentic connection in the world. Every individual who refuses to absorb others' emotional toxicity forces those others to develop their own capacity for emotional regulation. In this way, the breaking of one empath becomes a gift to the collective, a disruption of dysfunctional patterns that have been passed down through generations. Jung understood that individual healing always serves the healing of the whole. When one person breaks free from unconscious patterns, they create ripples that affect every system they touch. The empath who learns to honor their own needs teaches their children that self-care is not selfish. The partner who sets boundaries with toxic family members creates space for healthier dynamics to emerge. The friend who stops rescuing others from the consequences of their actions gives those others the opportunity to develop their own strength and wisdom. This is the ultimate meaning of the empath's breaking. Not just personal transformation, but collective evolution. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, let us acknowledge the courage required for such a journey. To break from patterns that have defined your identity for decades requires a kind of bravery that few possess. To face the terror of being unloved for who you truly are, rather than what you can provide, demands extraordinary faith. To risk the collapse of relationships built on unconscious contracts requires a commitment to truth over comfort. But Jung believed that this courage is not optional for those called to the empathic path. It is the price of authentic existence, the cost of living from the center of your own being rather than the periphery of others' expectations. If you recognize yourself in these words, if you feel the trembling that precedes the breaking, know that you are not alone in this journey. The path you are walking has been walked by countless souls before you, empaths who learn to transform their gift from a source of suffering into a fountain of wisdom. Trust the process, even when it feels like destruction. Honor the breaking, even when it terrifies you. Remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is the refusal to love in ways that destroy you. The day the empath snaps is not the end of your empathic journey, it is the beginning of your conscious empathic mastery. It is the moment when sensitivity becomes strength, when vulnerability becomes power, when the gift that once felt like a curse reveals itself as the blessing it was always meant to be. Go forward from this understanding with the knowledge that your breaking is your breakthrough. Your limitation is your liberation. Your empathic wound is your empathic wisdom waiting to be born. And remember always that the world needs conscious empaths, not those who absorb without discrimination, but those who love without self-destruction, who feel deeply while remaining whole, who serve others while honoring themselves. This is Jung's ultimate message to the empaths of the world. Your sensitivity is sacred. Your boundaries are holy, your breaking is your making, and your healing is humanity's hope.